Hey everyone, let me tell you about the night I almost quit being a trucker. I've been driving for 20 years now, crisscrossing the country in my big rig. It's a tough job, not for the faint of heart, but I love it. The open road, the solitude, it's where I feel alive. Now, this story happened a couple of years ago when I was doing an overnight haul through Montana. It was supposed to be a quick, no-nonsense delivery. You know the drill: load up, stay on schedule, get paid. But this route wasn't my usual gig. It was through some back roads, the kind that barely show up on GPS. The dispatcher called it a last-minute opportunity. That's code for nobody else wanted it. But money talks, right? So I took the job. The first couple of hours were smooth. The highway was empty, the kind of quiet where you can hear your own breathing. I cranked up my playlist, the same classic rock tracks I've been listening to since the 90s, and got into my zone. Things started to get weird around midnight. I was already feeling the fatigue creeping in. You know, that moment when your eyelids start to weigh a ton. I grabbed my go-to trick: sniffing salts. They sting like hell, but they wake you up faster than a double espresso. About an hour in, I saw headlights in my rearview mirror. Nothing unusual at first, but then they disappeared. Just like that. Gone. No turnoffs, no stops, nothing. I thought maybe my tired eyes were playing tricks on me, so I shook it off and kept going. Then the forest closed in around the road, the kind of dark where your high beams barely make a dent. That's when I saw it, a doll lying right in the middle of the road. At first I thought it was trash, but something about it made me slow down. I rolled to a stop, left the engine running, and stepped out to check. The air was freezing even for May and the doll. Its eyes were wide open, almost alive. Creepy as hell, but I told myself it was just a coincidence. Still, as I walked back to the truck, I swear I heard footsteps behind me. The next hour was a blur. I was tired, my nerves were shot, but I couldn't stop. I kept driving, and that's when I noticed something else. Clothes, scattered along the road like breadcrumbs leading me somewhere. First it was a single shirt, then a pair of jeans, then tiny shoes. That's when it hit me. This wasn't random. Someone had put these here. I didn't stop right away. My brain was racing, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Clothes in the middle of nowhere, tiny shoes. Who does that? I told myself to keep going, but curiosity got the best of me. So, I pulled over. Not my smartest move, I'll admit. The engine hummed as I stepped out into the cold night. My boots crunched against the gravel as I approached the scattered clothes. My flashlight lit up the pile. It was a mix of kids' and adults' clothing thrown together like someone had just dumped a suitcase. The air was too still, like the whole forest was holding its breath. I glanced around, shining the light toward the trees, but all I saw was darkness. My heart was pounding, but nothing happened. "Okay, Ethan," I muttered to myself. "It's just junk. Get back in the truck." But as I turned, I heard it. A faint rustling sound, like someone stepping on dry leaves. I froze, my ears straining. A second later it came again, this time from the opposite side of the road. My first thought? Animals. Maybe a raccoon or a deer. But then came the laughter. Soft, almost playful, but wrong. It sent a chill down my spine. I spun around, my flashlight beam darting through the trees. "Hello?" I called out, my voice shaky. No answer, just more rustling. I didn't wait to find out what it was. I ran back to my truck, climbed into the cab and locked the doors. But before I could pull away, a sound cut through the night. A child's cry. It came from deep in the woods, faint but unmistakable. My gut twisted. I wanted to drive off, but what if it was real? What if there was a kid out there who needed help? "Don't do it," I whispered to myself. "It's a trap." Then another cry, louder, closer. I couldn't just leave, so I did something stupid. I turned the truck to face the woods and flipped on the high beams. My headlights cut through the trees, and there they were. Figures, 4, maybe 5 of them, standing just inside the tree line. They were holding something, big speakers. That's when it clicked. The cries, the laughter, they weren't real. It was a recording. I stared, trying to make out details, but they ducked behind the trees out of sight. My hands were trembling as I grabbed my phone to call 911, but of course there was no signal. Then, bam! Something hit the back of the truck hard. The whole cab shook and I nearly dropped my phone. My adrenaline kicked in and I slammed the gear shift into drive. As I sped off, something, or someone, darted across the road in front of me. I only caught a glimpse. A figure in dark clothes, holding something shiny. They hurled it straight at my truck, smashing the passenger side window. Glass rained down as I floored it, my hands gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. The cries, the laughter, the figures in the woods, they didn't matter anymore. All I could think about was getting the hell out of there. I didn't stop. I couldn't. My heart was pounding like a drum, and every nerve in my body screamed at me to keep going. The smashed window whistled as the wind tore through the cab, chilling me to the bone. I checked the mirrors, hoping I'd left those maniacs behind. No such luck. A pair of headlights appeared in the distance, growing larger with every second. They weren't just following me, they were coming fast. I floored it, the engine roaring in protest as I pushed my truck to its limit. The lights stayed on me, weaving side to side like they were trying to box me in. Suddenly, the road curved sharply to the right. My tires screeched as I barely made the turn, but the car behind me wasn't as lucky. In the mirror, I saw them skid off the road, their headlights vanishing into the trees. For a moment, I felt relief, but then bam! Something slammed against the back of the truck again, harder this time. I nearly lost control as I struggled to keep the rig steady. Whatever hit me wasn't small. It felt like a sledgehammer smashing into the trailer. I glanced at the side mirror, and that's when I saw it. A figure was on my truck, clinging to the back, their silhouette barely visible in the faint moonlight. My stomach dropped. How the hell did they even get up there? I swerved hard, trying to shake them off. The truck groaned under the strain, but they held on. I could see them crawling along the side, heading for the cab. I knew I had to do something, so I did the only thing I could think of. I hit the brakes. The tires screeched and the trailer jolted violently. I heard a thud, then saw the figure tumble off the side and hit the road. My pulse was racing as I slammed on the gas, leaving them behind. But I wasn't out of danger yet. Up ahead, I saw something that made my stomach twist. A car parked across the road, blocking my path. I didn't have time to think. The roadblock was getting closer, and I knew they weren't there to help. Swerving wasn't an option. There were steep drop-offs on either side of the road. I gritted my teeth and aimed for the narrowest gap I could see. Come on, I muttered, gripping the wheel like my life depended on it. The truck roared as I sped up, the engine straining under the weight of the load. The figures standing by the car scattered at the last second, diving into the trees. My rig clipped the edge of their car, sending sparks flying as I plowed through. I didn't stop to see what happened next. I kept going, the road ahead finally clearing. The forest began to thin, and I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, I'd make it out of this alive. But then I heard it, the sound of something shifting inside the cab. I froze. Slowly, I glanced at the passenger seat. There was someone there, a figure dressed in dark clothes, their face hidden by a hood. I don't know how they got in, but they were there, sitting just a few feet away. My breath caught in my throat as I realized they were holding something. A knife. "Don't," I managed to choke out, my voice barely above a whisper. The figure didn't move. They just stared at me, or at least I think they did. I couldn't see their eyes under the hood. Then, in one quick motion, they opened the door and rolled out of the truck. Just like that, they were gone. I didn't stop to process what had happened. I just drove, not even caring about the speed limit anymore. By the time I reached the outskirts of the next town, the sun was rising. I pulled into the lot of the delivery depot, parked the truck, and collapsed against the steering wheel. I don't even remember how long I sat there before I finally called the cops. You'd think I'd feel safe once I was in town, surrounded by people and streetlights. But I didn't, not even close. I couldn't stop replaying the night in my head, The cries in the woods, the figures with the speakers, the guy clinging to my truck, and whoever that was in the cab. When the cops arrived, I told them everything, every little detail, even the parts that made me sound crazy. They didn't laugh or roll their eyes, though. The officer taking my statement just nodded like this wasn't the first time he'd heard something like it. That area's had incidents before, he said, carefully choosing his words. Disappearances, mostly. We'll send a team to check it out, but I wouldn't hold your breath for answers. Not exactly comforting. I finished unloading the truck later that morning, running on pure adrenaline. When I finally got back to my hotel, I crashed. I must have slept for 10, maybe 12 hours straight. But when I woke up, it hit me. What if they were still out there? The police never called back, and I didn't ask. Part of me didn't want to know. If they didn't find anything, fine. If they did, well, I wasn't sure I wanted to hear about it. For weeks, I kept looking over my shoulder every time I stopped at a rest area or pulled into a truck stop. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me, waiting for the right moment to finish what they started. I don't drive those back roads anymore. If a dispatcher tries to send me on one, I refuse, no matter how much they're paying. Call me paranoid, but I'm not taking any chances. Here's the thing, though. I can't stop wondering, what were they trying to do? If it was just a robbery, why not rush me when I got out of the truck? If it was something worse, why did they let me go? And who was that in my cab? The scariest part is knowing I'll probably never get answers. All I know is that I came way too close to being one of those incidents the cop mentioned. So, if you're out there driving late at night and see something strange, do yourself a favor. Don't stop. It's not worth the risk. Stay safe out there, folks. I've spent most of my life on the road. Trucks are in my blood, same as diesel fumes and late-night coffee. My name's Sam Brown, and I've seen enough strange things out there to last a lifetime. But there's one story I never tell unless I trust someone enough to know I'm not crazy. Tonight, I'll make an exception. It started with my daughter, Emily. She'd been bugging me for months to take her on a haul. "Come on, Dad," she said, flashing that grin of hers. "You're always talking about your adventures. Let me see for myself." Emily was 16, too old to listen to her old man, but too young to know better. Against my better judgment, I agreed. I figured one trip wouldn't hurt. We left at sunset, heading out on Route 17. The highway cut through endless miles of wilderness, a shortcut truckers used to shave hours off their trips. It was quiet, almost too quiet. Emily sat beside me, scrolling through her phone while I kept an eye on the road. We stopped at a gas station about an hour in, one of those places that looks like it hasn't seen a customer in years. The attendant, a wiry old man with sunken eyes, shuffled out and started pumping gas. "You're taking her on Route 17? He asked, nodding toward Emily. "That's the plan," I said, pulling out my wallet. He stared at me for a moment, then said, "You be careful out there. Road's got a history. Some things you don't stop for." I laughed it off, but Emily looked uneasy. She didn't say anything as we got back on the road. The first couple of hours were fine. Emily played DJ, switching between her playlists and my classic rock. She kept trying to get me to like some pop star with auto-tuned vocals. Then we saw it. There was a car flipped over on the side of the road, its headlights barely flickering. The metal was crumpled, the glass shattered like a bomb had gone off. "Dad, stop," Emily said, grabbing my arm. "We have to help." But something felt wrong. I slowed down, scanning the wreckage for signs of life. "There's no one here," I muttered. Then Emily pointed. "What about her?" Standing in the ditch was a woman. She wore a tattered dress, and her hair hung limp over her face. But it was her posture that froze me. She stood too still, like a statue. As the headlights swept over her, I realized why. She didn't have a face. Emily gasped. "Oh my God, Dad, go!" I slammed on the gas and the truck roared past. I couldn't look back. But Emily did. "She's walking," she whispered. Emily wouldn't stop looking out the back window. "She's gone, right?" she asked, her voice shaky. "Yeah," I lied, gripping the wheel tighter. Then the sound started. It was faint at first, a tap, tap, tap coming from the back of the trailer. I told myself it was just the road, but it grew louder, more deliberate. "Dad," Emily said, her voice trembling. "Do you hear that?" Before I could answer, the tapping turned into pounding. Thud, thud, thud. I glanced in the side mirror. Something was running behind us. It wasn't human. It was too fast, too long-limbed, its shadow stretching unnaturally in the red glow of the taillights. "Hang on," I said, flooring the gas pedal. The engine growled, but the pounding didn't stop. We finally saw a rest stop up ahead, a diner with a flickering neon sign. I pulled in so fast I nearly hit a post. The place was deserted, just a couple of trucks parked nearby. I jumped out and grabbed a flashlight, my hands shaking as I checked the trailer. Nothing. Emily got out, sticking close to me. She needed to use the bathroom, so we headed toward the building. Inside, the air was stale, the kind of smell you only get from years of neglect. Emily disappeared into the women's room while I leaned against the wall, trying to collect myself. That's when I heard it. A faint whisper, low and hoarse. "Sam." I froze. The hair on my neck stood on end. "Emily?" I called, but my voice cracked. She came out a minute later, pale and wide-eyed. "Dad, someone said my name." I didn't have the heart to tell her I'd heard it too. We got back on the road, but the silence was suffocating. Emily clutched her phone like it was a lifeline, and I kept my eyes on the road, praying for the night to end. Then the lights on the dashboard started flickering. The truck sputtered, and I slammed the wheel. "Not now," I muttered. Ahead, the woman was back, standing in the middle of the road. Her faceless head tilted unnaturally as the headlights hit her. I hit the brakes, but the truck wouldn't stop. Emily screamed as the cab filled with whispers, hundreds of voices overlapping, crying, laughing, screaming. The woman reached out, her hand brushing the windshield. "Dad, do something," Emily cried. I did the only thing I could think of. I started praying. "God, help us," I whispered. "Please." The whispers grew louder, a deafening roar. Then suddenly everything went silent. The woman was gone. The truck roared back to life, and I floored it, not stopping until we hit the next town. We pulled into a diner, our faces pale and our hands trembling. Emily didn't touch her food. Neither did I. "Do you think it's over?" she asked, her voice small. I didn't have an answer. From that night on, Emily never came with me on another haul. And me? I never drove Route 17 again. Some roads aren't meant for the living. Have you ever had a night where everything seemed off? Where your instincts screamed at you but you couldn't explain why? That's exactly how I felt on this particular evening. Let me introduce myself. My name is Mike, and I've worked in hotels for a few years now. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills. Over time, I've seen my share of strange things, but this was something else entirely. It was a quiet, rainy night in Seattle. The lobby was empty except for the soft hum of the air conditioning and the faint tapping of rain against the windows. I was at the front desk, scrolling through emails when I saw him. A man stepped into the lobby. At first glance, he didn't seem out of place. A tall guy in his 40s, bald, wearing a black coat and jeans. But something about the way he moved caught my attention. He didn't seem to have a purpose. No luggage, no phone, no interaction with anyone. He just wandered back and forth across the lobby like he was looking for something, or someone. After his fifth pass by the desk, I decided to speak up. "Excuse me, sir," I called out, keeping my voice calm but firm. "Do you need help with anything?" He stopped and turned to look at me. His face was expressionless, but his eyes had this cold, piercing intensity. For a moment, it felt like time slowed down, and I was the only thing he could see. Then, without a word, he turned and walked off toward the elevators. I felt a chill run down my spine. but I told myself not to overreact. Maybe he was just a guest. Still, something didn't sit right with me. I made a mental note to keep an eye on him. About 10 minutes later, the lobby phone rang. It was rare to get calls at that hour, and the sudden noise startled me. I picked it up, putting on my professional tone. "Front desk, how can I assist you?" There was no response. All I heard was breathing, slow, deliberate breathing. "Hello? Is anyone there?" I asked again, but the line stayed silent. After a few seconds, I hung up, assuming it was a prank. Not a minute later, the phone rang again. I sighed, already annoyed. "Front desk," I said sharply. "Please, I need help." A woman's voice whispered on the other end. She sounded panicked, almost out of breath. "I'm outside in the parking lot. I can't move. I was hit by a car." Her words jolted me upright. "What? Are you hurt? Did you call the police?" "No. Please, I need you to come out here," she pleaded. "I can't walk. I'm wearing a red dress. You'll see me." Something about her tone made my stomach churn, but before I could say more, she added, "The man who hit me. He's tall, bald, wearing a black coat and jeans." My heart sank. It couldn't be. It was the same man from earlier. I hesitated. "Are you sure? Did you see his face?" "Please, just come," she begged, her voice breaking. Against my better judgment, I grabbed my coat and stepped out into the rain. The rain hit me like needles as soon as I stepped outside. The parking lot was dimly lit, the overhead lamps flickering against the downpour. I scanned the area, my heart pounding, looking for the woman in the red dress. At first, I didn't see her. The lot seemed deserted, save for a few parked cars. Then, near the far end, I spotted her. She was standing still, her red dress clinging to her in the rain. Relief flooded me, but it was quickly replaced by unease. She wasn't hurt. She wasn't even calling for help. She was just staring. Before I could call out to her, I saw movement. From behind a car, the man emerged, the same one I'd seen wandering the lobby. My breath caught in my throat. He looked at me for a split second before ducking back out of sight. The woman turned her head toward me, her expression shifting into a slow, unsettling smile. Then, without warning, she dropped to the ground, screaming as if she were in agony. It was all wrong. Her voice, her movements. It was a performance, and I was the audience. I froze, unsure of what to do. My instincts screamed at me to run, but my feet felt glued to the ground. Then the man stepped out again, this time moving toward her. I snapped out of it and turned, running back toward the hotel as fast as I could. Back inside, I slammed the door shut and locked it. My heart was racing, my clothes soaked from the rain. I grabbed the phone and dialed 911, my hands shaking as I explained what had just happened. The dispatcher's voice was calm but skeptical. "You said they were in the parking lot? A man and a woman?" "Yes," I insisted. "The woman's wearing a red dress and the man is tall, bald, in a black coat. Please send someone." After hanging up, I went straight to the security room to check the cameras. If I could see them on the footage, maybe I could make sense of what was happening. But when I pulled up the parking lot feed, all I saw was static. My stomach dropped. The police arrived 20 minutes later, but by then, the parking lot was empty. No woman, no man. Just the sound of rain hitting the pavement. The officers took my statement and promised to investigate, but I could tell they didn't believe me. For weeks, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every time I worked the night shift, I found myself glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see that man or woman again. But they never came back. Then, one night, as I was starting my shift, I found an envelope on the front desk. It hadn't been there a moment ago. My name was scrawled on the front in shaky handwriting. I opened it, my hands trembling. Inside was a single piece of paper with a short, chilling message. "You were smart to run. Most aren't so lucky. See you soon." I stared at the note, my blood running cold. I looked around the empty lobby, the rain pounding against the windows. I checked the cameras. Nothing. It was like they had vanished into thin air. To this day, I don't know who they were or what they wanted. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. When something feels wrong, trust your gut. Because sometimes, the things lurking in the shadows are far more dangerous than you can imagine. Have you ever felt like someone was watching you even when you were alone? Trust me, by the end of this story, you'll think twice before staying in an Airbnb ever again. Hi, my name is Ethan. I'm 28, and I work as a freelance photographer. My life is a balance of deadlines and creative chaos, and whenever I get the chance, I escape to nature to recharge. But what I'm about to share isn't just some spooky story to entertain you. It's something that actually happened to me. If you enjoy real-life horror stories that make your spine tingle, hit the like button and subscribe because trust me, this is only the beginning. A few months ago, I booked a remote Airbnb in a quiet mountain town. I wanted solitude, time to breathe, and a chance to focus on my photography. The listing had rave reviews, words like peaceful, cozy, and perfect for a getaway stood out. It seemed like the escape I needed. When I arrived, things felt off. The house itself was charming, a rustic one-story cabin with big windows and a view of the forest. But the host's behavior made me uneasy. He was in his late 50s, tall, with piercing blue eyes and a forced smile that didn't quite reach them. He insisted on giving me a personal tour of the house, pointing out things like how the locks worked and where the emergency flashlight was. It wasn't unusual, but something about his intensity gave me chills. As he left, he said something strange. "Enjoy your stay, Ethan. Out here, the forest has eyes." He chuckled, but I didn't laugh. I brushed it off, attributing it to small-town quirks. The first night was uneventful. I spent hours editing photos, had a simple dinner, and went to bed early, excited to hit the trails the next day. But when I woke up, I noticed something strange. My camera bag, which I had left on the desk, was now on the floor. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe I had knocked it over without realizing. After a full day of hiking and capturing the most breathtaking shots of my life, I returned to the cabin exhausted but content. As I walked inside, though, the air felt heavier. My jacket, which I had tossed over a chair, was now folded neatly on the couch. The kitchen cabinets were slightly ajar, though I hadn't used them. I felt a knot forming in my stomach, but I convinced myself I was overthinking it. That night, I locked all the doors and windows before going to bed. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to a faint noise, a creak. At first, I thought it was just the house settling, but then I heard it again, closer this time. It was coming from the living room. My heart started pounding as I strained to hear. That's when I noticed the faint shuffle of footsteps. I grabbed my phone and tiptoed to the bedroom door, cracking it open just enough to peek into the hallway. The living room light was off, but the front door was open, just enough for someone to slip inside. My stomach turned. I whispered into my phone, calling 911. "Someone's in the house," I told the operator. My voice shook as I tried to explain my location. She told me to lock the door and stay quiet. The police were on their way. Then I heard it. Footsteps outside my bedroom. Slow, deliberate. The light from under the door dimmed as a shadow passed by. I held my breath, praying they wouldn't try to open it. The sound of heavy breathing sent chills down my spine. Whoever it was, they were standing right there. Suddenly, the doorknob rattled. I backed away, clutching my phone like it was a lifeline. "They're trying to get in," I whispered. The operator stayed calm, assuring me help was on the way, but every second felt like an eternity. Then, as quickly as it started, the sound stopped. The shadow retreated and I heard footsteps heading back down the hallway. I thought it was over, until I heard the unmistakable sound of a chair dragging across the living room floor. They weren't leaving. They were waiting. Minutes later, red and blue lights flashed through the windows. The sound of sirens filled the silence, and the front door burst open. The police stormed in, but the intruder was gone. They found muddy footprints leading out into the forest, but nothing else. No sign of who they were or what they wanted. The officers asked me questions, but I didn't have answers. I didn't see the person's face. I didn't know how they got in. But as I packed my things the next morning, I noticed something that still haunts me. A photo tucked into the corner of the living room mirror. It was of me, taken from outside the cabin. I showed it to the police, but they couldn't explain it. The host denied knowing anything about it, though his reaction seemed rehearsed, almost too casual. "Must have been a prank," he said, that strange smile never leaving his face. I haven't stayed in an Airbnb since. I can't even look at photos from that trip without feeling a chill. Sometimes I wonder if the host was involved or if it was just a random stalker who happened to pick that house. Either way, the forest doesn't feel peaceful anymore. It feels like it's watching. If you've made it this far, hit the like button and subscribe. Stay safe out there, and remember, if something feels wrong, it probably is. Trust your gut. It might just save your life. Have you ever felt like you were being watched? Not the casual glance from a stranger, but an unshakable sense that someone, somewhere, is studying your every move? Hi, I'm Mike, a 32-year-old graphic designer. I thought I'd seen it all. Deadlines, chaotic clients, the occasional coffee spill on my favorite designs. But nothing prepared me for the nightmare I lived last Christmas. By the end of this story, you'll understand why I still check the locks on my doors 3 times before going to bed. Last Christmas, I rented an Airbnb to stay close to my family. It was the perfect arrangement, space to unwind, but still near enough to join the holiday chaos. The house itself was charming, small, tucked into a quiet neighborhood with old, towering oaks lining the street. Perfectly ordinary, or so I thought. The first night I settled in with a cup of cocoa, appreciating the calm. The house creaked here and there, but I chalked it up to being old. By morning, I'd almost forgotten about the strange sense of unease I felt the night before, until I stepped outside. There he was. Standing just a few feet from my door, a man in a heavy coat stared at me. He didn't speak. His face was blank, his expression unreadable. Nervously, I nodded at him, but he didn't react. Instead, he raised his hand in a slow, deliberate wave. Weird, I thought, brushing it off. Maybe he was lost, or waiting for someone. Still, his presence gnawed at the edges of my mind throughout the day with my family. When I returned to the house that evening, something felt wrong. The air seemed heavier. The usual creaks of the house sounded louder. I tried to ignore it, settling on the couch with a movie. Then I heard it. A faint thud. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but enough to make me pause. I turned off the TV and strained my ears. Another sound followed, this time like soft shuffling, coming from the garage. Every hair on my neck stood up. I wanted to believe it was just the house settling, but something about it felt too deliberate. Gathering what little courage I had, I walked to the door leading to the garage. My heart pounded in my chest as I pressed my ear against it, breathing. Heavy, slow breathing. I froze, my mind racing. Someone was in there. The man? Could it be him? I turned and ran back to the living room, grabbing my phone. My fingers trembled as I called the police. "Someone's in the garage," I stammered, trying to keep my voice steady. "I saw a man outside earlier and now..." "Stay outside," the operator instructed. "Officers are on their way." I waited in my car, locking the doors and scanning the darkness. Every shadow felt like it could come alive at any moment. The police arrived within minutes, their flashlights slicing through the cold night air. I told them everything. The strange man, the breathing, the noises. Their initial calm demeanor shifted as I described the sounds behind the door. One officer motioned for me to stay back while the other cautiously opened the garage door. I held my breath, expecting to hear shouting or a struggle. But there was nothing. They searched the garage and the rest of the house, finding no one. Still, their faces were grim when they showed me the door to the garage. The lock had been scratched and damaged, like someone had tried to force their way in. "Whoever it was," one officer said, "they're gone now, but you should be careful. Lock everything and call us if you notice anything else." That was all I needed to hear. I couldn't stay another night. I packed up and left, cutting my trip short. As I drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the man standing in the shadows. But what haunts me most isn't what I saw. It's what I didn't. Who was the man? Why was he there? And what would have happened if I'd opened that door? Even now I catch myself looking over my shoulder, triple-checking my locks and scanning crowds for familiar faces. It's not paranoia, it's survival. So, next time you notice something that feels off, trust your instincts. Sometimes the small, quiet warnings are the loudest. And if you found this story gripping, hit that like button and subscribe for more tales that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Because trust me, some stories are just the beginning. You guys won't believe what happened to me on a rainy night last year while I was working the graveyard shift at this tiny convenience store in the middle of nowhere. It's a story I still replay in my head sometimes when it's storming out. Let me set the scene for you. It was one of those nights when the rain pounds so hard on the windows that you can barely hear yourself think. Thunder was booming, and every time lightning lit up the parking lot, it looked like a horror movie. Business was dead as usual, so I was just chilling behind the counter, scrolling through my phone to kill time. That's when I noticed it, a beat-up old car pulling into the lot. It parked under the flickering streetlight, and I waited for someone to get out, but no one did. 5 minutes passed, then 10. The car just sat there idling. I started feeling uneasy. I kept telling myself, it's probably someone waiting for the rain to let up, but man, something about it just didn't sit right with me. I could barely see through the rain, but I swore I saw movement inside the car, just shadows shifting. My stomach was doing flips. After what felt like forever, I decided to distract myself. I grabbed a trash bag and went out back to take care of the garbage. The rain drenched me in seconds, but honestly, it felt better than sitting there with my nerves on edge. As I tossed the bag into the dumpster, I noticed something weird. The door to the little jewelry store next door was open. And I don't mean cracked open. I mean, it was wide open, swinging back and forth in the wind. I froze. My first thought was, maybe someone forgot to lock up. But then I saw the door frame. It was splintered, like someone had kicked it in. That's when I heard it. The sound of drawers being yanked open and stuff clattering onto the floor. The jewelry store was pitch black inside, but I could see faint flashes of a flashlight beam bouncing around. My heart was pounding so hard I thought whoever was in there could probably hear it. I backed away slowly, trying not to make any noise, but a loud clap of thunder made me jump. I bolted back to the convenience store, locking the door behind me. My hands were shaking as I reached for my phone. Back inside, I felt safer for about 2 seconds. Then reality hit me. I had just seen someone breaking into the store next door. What if they decided to come after me? I dialed 911 with trembling fingers and tried to explain everything to the operator while keeping my voice low. "There's someone in the jewelry store next door," I whispered, peeking out the window. "The door's busted open, and I think they're still inside." As I was talking, I caught movement out of the corner of my eye. My stomach dropped. The figure from the car, it was a person wearing a hoodie stepping out into the rain. I couldn't see their face, but they were tall, and they had a flashlight in one hand and something bulky in the other. "They're coming this way," I hissed into the phone. The operator told me to stay calm and stay on the line, but my panic was through the roof. The person didn't go straight to their car. Instead, they started walking toward my store. I dropped to the floor behind the counter, keeping as quiet as I could. The glass doors rattled as they tried to open them, but I had locked them earlier. I heard them jiggle the handles harder, then bang on the glass. I could see their shadow through the shelves. They were pacing in front of the doors like they were trying to figure out a way to get in. The sirens, I heard them in the distance. They were faint at first, but they got louder and louder. The banging on the door stopped. I peeked over the counter just in time to see the figure sprinting back to the car. The car started up, but instead of peeling out of the lot, It just sat there again, like the driver couldn't decide what to do. My adrenaline was through the roof. The sirens got closer, and for a second I thought, finally it's over. But it wasn't. Not yet. The car was still sitting there, idling under the flickering streetlight. It felt like they were waiting for something, or someone. When the first police car pulled into the lot, its headlights lit up the entire scene. The person in the car must have panicked because they floored it, skidding out of the lot and straight onto the wet road. But they didn't get far. 2 more police cars were already blocking the exit. The suspect slammed on the brakes, fishtailing before coming to a stop. Officers jumped out with flashlights and weapons drawn, shouting commands. "Get out of the vehicle, hands where we can see them." The driver didn't move at first. For a split second I thought they might make a run for it, but then the door opened slowly. The person stepped out, hood still up, and raised their hands. I stayed glued to the window, heart racing as the officers cuffed them and pulled something out of their pocket, a flashlight and what looked like a crowbar. They opened the trunk of the car, and that's when things got really intense. The cops pulled out a duffel bag stuffed with jewelry and what looked like a bunch of cash. One of them held up something else, a gun. I couldn't tell if it was loaded, but just seeing it made my stomach churn. Back inside, I slumped against the counter, trying to catch my breath. The cops came into the store a few minutes later, asking me to explain what happened. I told them everything: the car, the figure, the noises from the jewelry store, and how the guy had tried to get into my shop. They nodded, taking notes, and assured me I did the right thing by calling them. One of the officers said, "This guy's been hitting stores all over the area. We might have just saved someone else from dealing with him tonight." Hearing that made me feel a little better, but honestly, I was still shaking like a leaf. The cops stuck around for a while, securing the scene and talking to the owner of the jewelry store when they showed up. Apparently, the guy had broken into 3 other places in the past month using the same method. As they loaded him into the back of the police car, I caught a glimpse of his face, pale, soaked from the rain, and completely emotionless. It was creepy how calm he looked, like this was just another night for him. After things settled down, I sat in the back room of the store, replaying everything in my head. What if I hadn't locked the doors? What if the cops hadn't shown up in time? I didn't sleep much that day. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the guy's shadow pacing in front of the doors. The next time I worked a night shift, I brought a baseball bat with me. Eventually, I quit that job. It just wasn't worth it. But you know what's funny? Sometimes when it's storming outside, I catch myself glancing out the window, half expecting to see that old car parked under a streetlight again. And every time I think about that night, I'm just grateful it ended the way it did. It could have gone so much worse. There you have it, guys. That's my story. Crazy, right? Let me know in the comments if you've ever had a night like this, or if you'd ever work a graveyard shift after hearing this. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this story. Stay safe out there.